Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We're a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today we're going to continue our series on the core classes in the Pathfinder 2nd edition core rulebook. We did Alchemist previously, and this week we're going to be covering the Barbarian. So Barbarians have the highest amount of HP gained per level at 12, and that includes at creation and every level thereafter. And their boosted stat, just for being a barbarian, is of course strength. So, just like we did with the alchemist, we're going to run through your starting proficiencies and at what levels, if any, they advance. And so for barbarian, they begin expert in perception, which is pretty solid. They won't advance to master until 17, and that's where they cap. So not a lot of advancement as you go, but starting an expert is about as good as anybody does. So definitely not a bad progression there. For saving throws, barbarians begin at expert for fortitude, not too surprising, and will advance to master at level 7 and legendary at level 13. And legendary fortitude saves is the only thing that barbarians get to legendary by default. You know, of course, as with all classes and any character, you can get to legendary in 1 or 2 skills, but as far as guaranteed part of the class, legendary fortitude. Very thematic for the barbarian. May not be quite the most exciting thing that you're looking for, but we'll get into how the rest of the build works around that as we go. For reflex, they begin only trained and will become expert at 9th level and will not progress any further. This is a little bit strange if you're used to 1st edition barbarians that were a very sort of dodgy class, almost as good in that way as a rogue. But as we'll see here, they do begin at expert in will and will go up to master at 15. So they are a much more mentally resistant than they used to be. And I think most people that played barbarians in 1st edition or had a barbarian in their party will agree you'd rather that barbarian fail its reflex save and take some extra damage than fail that will save and get mind controlled and start swinging at the party. That is not what anyone wants. For attacks and strikes, the barbarian will begin trained at level 1 and will become expert pretty quickly at level 5, and then will finally advance to master at 13 and will not progress any further than that. That's fairly low, you might think, but it's not bad. I mean, really, the only thing that's going to get to legendary is fighter anyway for melee attacks. It is maybe a little slower than you would expect, but the idea with the barbarian, as we'll continue to see, is they're not the most accurate attackers. You know, not a lot of skill involved in what they do. So they are trained throughout all that in simple, martial, and unarmed attacks, which gives you a pretty wide open number of options for the way that you attack. And then your instinct, which is part of your rage, and we'll definitely get into that, will open that up even further into some very unique options. It is important to note that barbarians will get weapon specialization at 7th level and greater specialization at 15th. They will also get critical specialization beginning at level 5. That's something we didn't talk about much in the Alchemist, but weapon specialization is just a flat boost, usually just a couple of points, I think up to 6 for greater specialization, just so that the thing that you do the most, you're going to have a little bit of an edge on versus just anybody who happens to pick up a melee weapon. That critical specialization is really cool because that gives you access to unique abilities that are specific to each weapon, so that when you score a critical hit, you will get a bonus effect with that weapon. In addition to, you know, everybody gets the big boosted damage, or, you know, the double damage, you also get a neat effect. Like for swords, for example, you can sort of stagger an enemy and they'll be flat-footed. Very cool, super fun option, and really, you know, when you get those crits, it allows you to put a little bit of minor crowd control sometimes, or battlefield control into that fight, which on martial characters is a big win. For defenses, you're going to see barbarians begin trained, and they will become expert at level 13 and master at 19. And they are trained in, or they are proficient in light, medium, and unarmored defense. So light armor, medium armor, and no armor. This you will recognize as being the same to the Alchemist that we sort of talked about how, we might want to see that higher. It's also basically the same as the casters in the book. Again, the Barbarian is, and we'll talk about it, but the Barbarian is not a terribly defensive class. They really do, I don't want to say they just do one thing. We'll see how many options they really do get. But they do have one primary goal, and that is not to avoid damage. So for skills, you will be trained in athletics and up to three additional skills plus any for your intelligence modifier. So intelligence isn't terribly important for a barbarian, so you're probably going to be trained in 4 skills. The cool thing with Pathfinder 2nd Edition is there's a million ways to gain more skill proficiencies, especially for them to just be trained. And everybody, once you've got your base number, is really going to be progressing the same. So, you're going to not have any fewer legendary skills necessarily than somebody who starts with 8 trained skills. So don't worry about that too much. Don't let that be a detriment or, a determining factor to you not picking this class. There's plenty of ways to make up for that. Finally, you're going to be trained in Barbarian class DC, and that's going to go to Expert and then eventually Master at level 19. What's that used for? You'll see in some of the instinct abilities. We'll just say that it's going to be, one of the most fantastic uses for it is going to be your Dragon's Breath, and we'll get into that. So the bread and butter ability of the Barbarian is Rage. And we're not going to talk about Rage immediately, just because Rage is functionally the entire class in 2nd edition. Everything plays off of and into it. It's a lot more than just a state of mind like it was in previous editions. It's a whole new world. So before we dive into that, I do want to talk about an ability you get at 3rd level for Barbarians, and it's the only other one that's not really tied to Rage, and that is Deny Advantage. So you may be familiar, if you're familiar with 1st edition Pathfinder or 3.5 D&D, you may be familiar with flanking. It's in 2nd edition as well, and in addition to flanking, there's a number of ways to get advantage on a target. Barbarians have a special ability, Deny Advantage, that means that unless the attacker is higher level than you, they don't get an advantage on you, even if they're flanking, if they're hidden, if they're concealed, whatever it is. And that's really cool, especially for how, and we'll get into it, how squishy barbarians really can be. So it's just another weird niche sort of defense on a big laundry list stack of niche defenses that barbarians get to make up for their susceptibility to just taking regular hits. So I've sort of got an example here. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but we've got a barbarian here, and we've got these 2 lower level creatures, goblin and a kobold. So he doesn't have to worry about being flanked, which means that if he's fighting a rogue, he may be ignoring any chance for sneak attack. He's not going to be risking even higher chances of critical hits on himself, which is very cool. So these guys, neither one can gain advantage on them. However, if you bring in something that is higher level, this Minotaur will represent our tougher bad guy, he now can gain advantage. He still cannot, this little guy here, this lower level enemy, but that lower level enemy can provide a flanking situation for the higher level enemy. So it's not a perfect system. It's a little bit of nuance to it. It's not as simple as, I cannot be flat-footed. Especially considering the way that monsters scale in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, some of your toughest fights are going to be against things that are technically higher level than you. It just means that in situations other than that, the Barbarian has that extra layer of protection. So that's why I sort of wanted to have this little example here, because I know for a lot of people, especially people that don't play with grids a lot, that can be sort of hard to imagine and see. So that's why I wanted to provide the example. So now let's talk about Rage. It is the quintessential Barbarian class feature, and it really is the basis for everything the class is going to do meaningful. It's the reason you pick a Barbarian instead of a fighter or a ranger or whatever you're going for. In addition to just being a great suite of abilities, It's what ties into the subclasses of Barbarian. So in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and if you're playing 5th Edition D&D, you're going to know them as archetypes. They might still sometimes refer to them as subclasses, depending on, the terminology your group prefers. But archetypes in 2nd Edition are a very different animal. So I'm not going to use that term. I'm going to say subclasses. So we talked about the Alchemist getting Chirurgeon, Bomber, and Mutagenist. For Barbarian, there's nothing quite that different in terms of, the goal you're going for with your class. But those different types of rage that you get are going to give you a pretty different feel while still doing the primary function, which is hitting things very hard. So everyone, while raging, will gain temporary HP equal to the Constitution modifier plus your level. You will also have a -1 penalty to your AC, and that's sort of where we're going to see things continue to backslide for the Barbarian defensively. You will also gain +2 bonus damage to all your melee strikes. And there are situations or feats and things like that you can get that will allow that to apply more broadly. And as you gain in level and as you select your instincts as well, that number will increase. So it starts at 2. We're going to already see that for a lot of different rage types, you're going to be starting higher than 2. And that will bring us into the types of rage. They're called instincts in this, and there are a few different versions. I'm sure we'll see more as time goes on, but the ones we have are already pretty exciting and pretty varied. I should note that I mentioned earlier the critical specialization that only actually applies while you're raging. Weapon specialization that I talked about apply whether you're raging or not, but it's going to get significantly boosted while raging. So every rage is going to begin, or every instinct is going to begin with an instinct ability at first level, as well as an anathema, and that's going to be a type of actions that if you take them, they will prevent you from gaining your instinct abilities until you take a day of downtime. So an anathema is a series of actions that, or conduct that are basically antithetical to either the oath or whatever mystical force or anything that might drive you. So for a cleric, it might be anathema to go against the teachings of your deity. For a druid, it's going to be anathema to go to cause pollution or allow pollution to happen without doing something to stop it. Basically, it's saying that I and the forces that give me these powers are so against them that if I partake in them or do not stand against these types of actions or mindsets, then the power that I am given will be taken away. Sometimes, especially for barbarians specifically, that anathema could be much more of a mind over matter sort of thing, like losing your confidence more so than losing some spiritual connection, although you are certainly free to roleplay that however you want, whatever's most interesting for your character and your table. This might be really strange to you, sounding a lot like a druidic order or a paladin or champions, like oaths and tenets of faith and all their special rules, and it is for barbarians. Don't worry, the Fury Barbarian does not have any anathema. It also doesn't have as many unique abilities. It's a much more classical, if you just want to come in and play a big tough character that gets mad, swings really hard, and doesn't always make the best decisions, Fury Barbarian is going to be your way to go. If you're looking for more flavor, though, those are going to come with anathema. Beginning at 7th level, you'll get weapon specialization, which is going to be typically a pretty good boost to your raging damage. And then at 15th level, you're going to get greater specialization, and this is a massive damage boost. So beginning at 15th level, depending on your instinct, you'll be adding anywhere from 12 to 18 extra damage every single time you hit with a melee strike. That is wild. That is a big, gigantic bonus, and it's why barbarians are absolutely dangerous on the battlefield. Beginning at 9th level, you will get Raging Resistance. So in addition to your temporary HP, in addition to your Deny Advantage, you're going to also at 9th level, based on your instinct, you're going to gain a damage reduction or a resistance against certain damage types based on that instinct. So usually it's 2 damage types, but it can vary with the instinct, and we'll go into all those in just a moment. So, animal instinct. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You choose a totem animal. There's a pretty wide list, everything in there from bears to sharks to frogs, so definitely some weird stuff. But what that does is anytime you rage, your body will morph sufficiently to gain whatever appendages or parts or growths you need to be able to make a natural attack based on the type of animal you've chosen. So if you go deer, you're going to gain antlers. If you go bear, you're going to gain claws, that sort of thing. As you increase in level, those natural attacks which have set dice will go up in dice, as well as benefiting from your weapon specialization bonuses going up to beginning at 5 and then going up to 12. So very strong bonus. Your anathema for being an animal instinct barbarian is you cannot wield traditional forged, crafted weapons. While raging, all you can use are your natural attacks given to you by your totem. Outside of rage, of course, you're free to use a bow, whatever you need to, but while raging, you are, you're Wolverine, Berserker, you've just got your claws or whatever you have. The next type of rage is possibly the most dramatic, and that's the Dragon Instinct. So Dragon Instinct will change your damage type from your rage bonus damage. Instead of being based on whatever weapon you're wielding, it will become a damage type based on the dragon that you select. So if you select red, that's fire. If you select ice or white, that's ice. And so that's going to give you some nice elemental options for all the sorts of creatures that might have elemental weaknesses. And it means you're dealing, even at low levels, you're dealing 2 different types of damage with each swing, which is hard to do and can help you bypass resistances. So overall, that's a really, really cool thing. Your anathema is going to be based on how you behave around dragons of that type. So you can choose, you do have the option, which is, I think, really nice. You can choose to either respect those types of dragons, and then it's anathema to act against them or disrespect them. Not to your, and we'll talk about it, but none of your anathemas are going to force you into doing anything to hurt yourself or anything like that. It's just sort of a code of conduct, but certain extreme situations, you're allowed to defend yourself and things like that. So maybe instead of revering these dragons, you hate these dragons, and then it becomes a question of it's anathema to not stand against these types of dragons if you have the opportunity. Dragon Instinct barbarians will reduce the amount of damage they take from the energy type of their dragon's breath weapon, as well as piercing. And in case I didn't mention it before, the damage reduction is equal to 3 plus your constitution modifier. So that's how much you resist. Next, we are going to get to what could be considered the most boring. It's certainly the most standard classic field barbarian, and that's the Fury Instinct. So Fury Instinct barbarians have pretty much no unique feat chains or special abilities. What they do get is they get some of the better damage per rage bonus. They also get a lot of versatility, and they have no anathema, which means that they are free to behave however they like in whatever situation they like. And this is a cat. The other bonus to going a Fury Barbarian is that you resist all types of physical weapon damage. So that means that probably 9 fights out of 10, unless you're fighting, mostly monsters in your campaign. If somebody's swinging a weapon at you, you're probably going to resist that damage. It is specific that it is only weapon-based damage, so even though it's physical, if you take a fall or rocks fall on you, as some DMs like to do, or even a monk or anybody using unarmed attacks, that will not apply for your resistance. So that's kind of a big caveat there. The other thing you get for being a Fury Instinct Barbarian is you will get a bonus first level feat. Now, if you happen to be a human, whatever heritage you choose, but if you happen to start base human and go Fury Barbarian, you're potentially starting with 3 first level Barbarian feats. I'm going to tell you right now, There's probably not 3 first level Barbarian feats that you're going to really feel like you need, but hopefully when the Advanced Player's Guide comes out and as we continue to add more, that's going to make that even more enticing. Next is another one of the exciting instincts, in my opinion, and that's the Giant Instinct Barbarian. For Giant Instinct Barbarians, failing to face a personal challenge or a test of strength is anathema. So, basically you just can't back down from, showing off how strong you are. You can't really always turn the other cheek sort of thing, which can lead to some great interesting character moments. Your instinct ability is going to be that you gain access to an oversized weapon. That is pretty cool. It's just a guaranteed extra damage dice. It does come with, or a higher damage dice rather. It does come with the clumsy trait, which means that as long as you're wielding that weapon, you're going to take a -1 penalty to any and every dex-based check that you do. And that means that the Giant Instinct Barbarian is the most squishy of the 3. And this might seem counterintuitive to you, and it sort of is. But they are also going to get the highest bonus damage based on their instinct when they're raging. They're going to get 18 additional damage per swing beginning at level 15 and always be a couple steps ahead throughout the advancement, well, before level 15. But, 18 damage is a lot. They're also going to gain access, we'll talk about a little bit later, some feats that can really make them just terrifying on the battlefield. The raging resistance that you get as a Giant Instinct Barbarian is functionally, it's based on the type of giants that you revere or want to emulate or, have inspired you in whatever way. So you would get to choose between electricity, frost, and fire, sort of replicating, your storm giant, your fire giant, your frost giant sort of thing. Some of your classics. It's nice that you get that choice. Doesn't seem to be any flavorful or anything further than that. You just get to flat out choose a choice. Can be really nice if you know that your DM or your game is going to be in a certain type of element or a certain type of region. Like if you're going to be in frozen wastes, tundras and things, that, it's instant choice, go with that cold resistance. So that's a really nice thing that there's no real baggage to that choice. The final, maybe weirdest, it's the one I chose for my Barbarian that I'm playing, is the Spirit Instinct. With Spirit Instinct Barbarians, the idea is that you are, inspired by either spirits, maybe possessed, whatever it is, protected, guided by them. And so you're going to get to choose to deal either positive or negative damage as your rage damage, which means, again, you're bypassing some pretty weird resistances. It's an odd damage type that you don't see much, especially at low levels. And if you do choose to, and what's cool is you can choose each time you rage which of those two, if either, you want to do. As long as you're doing one or the other, however, your weapon gains or is treated as if it has a ghost touch, which makes you more effective at fighting incorporeal creatures. Very cool. Your anathema is that you cannot disrespect the dead. You can't desecrate a corpse needlessly, and you can't disrespect spirits that may guard something. Leads to a lot of potential roleplay possibilities, and I think it's pretty fun. For your raging resistance, you resist negative energy, and this is very cool, depending on your campaign, any damage caused by the attacks or abilities of an undead creature. That is huge, especially if you're playing a heavily undead focused campaign. That is very strong. So lastly here, we're just going to run through some of the feats. As with the Alchemist, there's way too many to really cover, but I do want to touch on some, especially the ones that are specific to the instincts that you chose. So Animal Totem Barbarians can actually reduce and eliminate even that AC penalty that they get by taking a 6th level feat called Animal Skin. And that will actually, instead of taking a penalty to their AC, a -1, they'll actually gain a +1 to their AC. This will treat them as if they're in armor and reduce their maximum dexterity penalty, but that's still pretty nice that you don't have to, especially if you're already wearing armor that has that maximum armor penalty. It means that you functionally are bypassing a lot of the riskier parts of the Barbarian. Animal Instinct is sort of the weakest, I think, of all of them. But in addition to that, that animal skin, you also gain a pounce ability, which is great for your action economy, being able to move and strike in a single action. And you gain the ability to turn into your totem animal. And that's very unique, very cool. Could be, if you've taken like an eagle or something like that, or a shark, can be a big boost to your capabilities outside of combat in a utility sense as well, which is something that is just really, compared to first edition, very nice addition as options for the Barbarian. Dragon Instinct Barbarians will gain the ability to, at level 6, they can choose to pick up a feat that will give them a breath weapon based on the type of dragon they chose. That is very, very cool. It deals a lot of damage. It's 1d6 per level, not like per spell level, per level, so it's pretty strong. Your class DC that we mentioned earlier is generally going to be pretty far behind. A lot of things will probably be making that save, but when they don't, or if they roll really bad and critically fail, it's a lot of damage, believe me. We have a character in one of my games that uses this to great effect. In addition to the Dragon's Breath, you'll have the option to gain Dragon Wings, and even eventually, whenever you rage, you have the option to turn into a dragon. That's really cool. That is something that is off the wall, for a martial character, a character that doesn't have ostensibly any spell casting, anything like that, to just have that in your back pocket, not just for the coolness factor, not just for, honestly, not very many bonuses that you get from that, but just the ability to gain fly speed, take up more space, and all the sort of niche bonuses that come with changing your form like that. Very, very cool. On that sort of similar note, the Giant Instinct Barbarian has a series of feats where they can just increase the reach of any weapon that they're using, which is cool enough, but they can also increase their own size with some of these feats, up to large and then eventually huge, assuming you start medium. And that's a very big deal. And primarily because of reach. And when you combine it with something like Cleave or Whirlwind, you are a walking AoE spell. And that is nuts, especially when you consider the amount of damage you're dealing. Wizards and their fireballs will be jealous of the types of things that you can do by just wading into a group of enemies and spinning around with your big axe or whatever you have. It is a game-changing, it is an event when this happens, and it is really fun to watch. Spirit Instinct Barbarians have a couple feat options. One, to sort of have these spirits dance around them and prohibit Spirit Instinct Barbarians at 6th level will gain will have the option to gain Spiritual Interference, which is these sort of wisps might dance around you and cause a sort of almost like a concealment effect for ranged attackers. That's pretty nice use of your third action a lot of times. And then at higher level, I think level 12, they'll also gain the ability to send just a wisp, just direct one of these spirits to go attack somebody up to 120 feet away, I think. For a Barbarian to have a nice go-to, relatively effective 4d8 plus your Constitution modifier ranged attack is pretty strong, that you can use while raging, and you don't have to switch weapons at all. That's a pretty niche, but pretty cool ability. In addition to these instinct specific, which you'll notice there weren't really any for Fury, because again, it's sort of the Swiss Army knife. It really does everything, but doesn't specialize in anything. But in addition to these instinct specific sort of feat options you have, there are also a lot of standalone or separate feats, either singular or chains. There are a lot of really cool reactions Barbarians can get. They can get Attack of Opportunity, which is not a guarantee in Pathfinder 2nd Edition for anyone except for a fighter. And even characters that do have access to it, like the Barbarian, it's an option. It's something that you've got to spend a resource on. It's not, a given. So I think only Barbarians and Champions, although Rangers and Monks do get something similar. But the point is it's a limited number of people, so just having access to it is pretty cool. You can also get the ability to rage as a reaction if somebody hits you. This is nice for managing your action economy. You can also get the ability to, it's called No Escape. It's one of my favorite reactions. It's a carryover from rage powers in first edition Pathfinder. If somebody tries to run from you, you can move up to your movement speed along with them. Just no escape. It can really ruin an enemy's plans, and it's super fun. Other than that, there's a lot of ways to boost your movement speed. There's a lot of ways to increase your action economy. And there's a pretty big focus on intimidation with the Barbarian. There's a first level feat that you can get that will, whenever you qualify for it, you'll automatically gain a couple of really cool skill feats, including Scare to Death, which is where you just point at somebody and you're so scary they might die of a heart attack. Very just thematic, cool, awesome for a Barbarian. So that's pretty much mechanics. That's what you're getting with the Barbarian. Overall, it's sort of a weird class. You might go into it thinking that you're going to be playing a tank of some sort. You are not. You are going to feel much closer to a rogue or just a standard DPS with your defenses and everything. You might even sort of feel like a wizard, especially as you get to the higher levels where you're breathing fire, turning into a dragon, or doing whirlwind AoEs. Like a martial character that has AoE options is very weird. You're hitting really hard. You are a glass cannon in a lot of ways. We talked about some ways that you might be able to mitigate that, and really the Animal Instinct Barbarian is least squishy for sure, but it's also probably the least offensively strong. So it's a give and take. The most offensively strong, hands down, would be the Giant Instinct, and it is absolutely the easiest to hit. And again, with second edition and the +10, -10 critical success and critical failure rule, that means that not only are you easier to hit by 10% on a chance on the dice, you're also 10% more likely to be critically hit, and that is brutal. I mean, it's a lot of damage. So for that reason, make sure that you know what you're getting if you're playing a Barbarian. Make sure that your party knows how you're going to work, whereas a fighter or a champion or even a monk can just wade into battle and might not take any damage in a full round of attacks because their defenses are so good or their options are so good. The Barbarian is most likely going to get hit. Maybe not every time somebody attacks them, but likely every round you're going to take damage. That's why you have all those ways to mitigate it. And that's the price you're paying to be the single biggest burst damage class probably in the game. In addition to these big damage options, you have new options that you've never had before as a Barbarian, as a Martial in general. The ability to take on an animal form, the ability to gain wings and fly, or even become a dragon. These are all really unique, high flavor options that make really interesting characters. You can just go Fury. It's great. It's very solid. But by taking some of these more odd instincts, you really get to incorporate a lot of fun elements into your character, not just mechanics-wise, but also lore-wise, and so RP-wise. For that reason, I feel like Barbarian is, right now, it's my favorite class, I think. To be fair, it's the one that I'm playing right now. I'm sure I'll like a lot of them as I go through and play them. It's flawed. It's not perfect. Anything that is designed to be a frontliner and is expected to take a lot of damage, can take some getting used to. But the amount of damage output that you have, the amount of unique reactions and options that you have in combat are surprising for what might typically have been considered just a dumb brawler type. And it's just a lot of unique abilities and unique flavor that didn't need to be there, but is there, and it's a wonderful improvement. So that is the Barbarian for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. If you have anything you want to add, definitely get down in the comments. Is there something that I forgot to mention? Is there something that you think might make up for some of those flaws, or really add on to those boosts? If you have any build recommendations, anything like that, definitely down in the comments. Let us know. And thanks so much for hanging out. Welcome to the Collective, and we'll see you next time.